We are going to talk about how on earth you navigate the complexity of delivering an omni-channel strategy with all of the complexities of data compliance and privacy at your footsteps, right? So first things first, let's introduce ourselves so you know who's going to be speaking. I'm Natasha Ness. I head up go-to-market efforts over at Shift. I have a background that's blended between product, UX, sales, marketing, and customer success. And I've worked with a lot of really great clients, many of which have had to navigate some of these same challenges as well. So excited to share some of those lessons learned. And I'll pass the mic over to my co-facilitator, Daniel.
Hey everyone, Daniel Mulvihill, and I work with our enterprise technology services team, and seen a lot of movement lately with our clients dealing with a lot of compliance challenges and questions, and we've tackled them in different ways. So excited to kind of bring the tech layer to today's talk. We are going to chat through a few things today. First, a little bit about Shift, and then kind of frame up the question that we're addressing today with tug of war. And then we'll go through the litany of regulations that are out there, and then try to give you a framework of how to think about all the different things that are coming and how to be prepared for the future. We have a tool we call Compass to Compliance that we'll talk you through. And then some next steps. Back to you, Natasha.
That's right. All right. So if you don't know who Shift is, let's first give our introduction so you know who it is that's speaking with you. So at Shift, we partner with organizations to bring a true reflection of their business to life through the lens of technology and data. And we do this through three areas of expertise: growth consulting, technology transformation, and of course, bringing to life personalized experiences. And we do this by our awesome team of over 200 individuals, from engineers to analysts, from consultants to strategists, with well over 20 years in business across a number of organizations coming together under the new moniker of Shift. We've had over 4,000 engagements over the years, and I can guarantee you probably about 90% of them have had to deal with some pretty complex, hairy compliance challenges. And for those who don't know, we have just recently evolved our capabilities to include UX and development with our recent acquisition of Principal Studios, which is a pretty exciting investment and opportunity for us to support clients even further in bringing their business to life through their technology. As a not so spoiler alert, but also big disclaimer, we're not lawyers, we're marketers. So if you really do want to get in and understand your very unique, specific use cases, talk with your legal counsel. But what we have put together here is our best practices that we have learned through the years. And really, applied those to how best to market effectively throughout this process. So let's talk a little bit about the tug of war that is, making sure that you're delivering personalized customer experiences, but also battling with privacy. So consumers are craving all sorts of in their hand personalized experiences. They wanted them yesterday. They want their experiences from a marketing perspective, from a shop that they might online frequent, to be tailored to their needs, whether they think it or not. It's instinctively something that they want. They don't want necessarily an Amazon recommendation for something that they would never buy. But at the same time, all of those recommendations, all of that personalization is driven by their own data. So at the same time, buyers are also asking for far more restrictions, far more respect of their own data privacy. And so this is a really challenging balance and dance that a lot of marketers are facing today. And so how best do you find that sweet spot between that tug of war that allows you to personalize experiences, but also adhere to regulations that those markets or those states or even your business type. For example, a lot of healthcare and pharma organizations and finance organizations are going to have very specific regulations as well. So how do you do that? So while we're going to go through a lot of intricacies and a lot of tactics, I would say it's best to start at these three areas. Number one, leverage data responsibly and deliver experiences that are only relevant to your customers. So that might mean targeted content, product recommendations that are, again, based on content that likely is content that is very explicit to data that they have prompted or provided to you. Second, understand the needs and the preferences through very ethical ways of capturing data. So those things could include surveys, they can include opt-ins, and you can do these in micro areas. So it could be a quick question that's asked through an Instagram post or sponsored content on LinkedIn. It could be an email that has a series of questions or a form that you actually fill out directly in that email. There is a lot of ways to capture data without, harvesting it or snagging it from other sources that are not necessarily ethical. And then providing control over that customer's data. So we'll talk a little bit about, now preference centers aren't the end all be all, but there's a lot of mechanisms you can use to give control back to your consumers throughout this process. So there are a lot of realities of regulations that marketers have to face. And let's give it for the marketers who have to part of the day, navigate their campaigns, be creatives, be, part-time legal enthusiasts, and also try and, navigate budgetary challenges and technology challenges. This is just one of the many challenges that marketers face. So our hope is that throughout this content and throughout these tactics that you can really navigate these challenges more effectively. But in reality, there have been some missteps from some pretty big brands. And so many organizations have faced fees and ramifications due to GDPR, CASL compliance, incompliancy, CCPA incompliancy, among other things. And so we thought we would do a little bit of scare tactics and share what some of those items are here. And some of them are very common things that marketers end up having to endure or unintentionally exploring through their marketing efforts. And they can be quite costly. And some of these well-known brands, for example, might have just had an inaccessible website. And that is easier than you think to have an inaccessible website. You might have a faulty unsubscribe link. So having a broken link in your unsubscribe emails can be reported and cause some, major fees and fines. And so ensuring that you're dialed in from a compliance and regulatory check is really important. Now, there's not one size fits all. Marketers do tend to struggle to navigate what to implement. And so while preference centers are great, they're not going to be the end all be all of everything. And then things like allowing intentional double opt-ins on top of those preference centers might be a value add, but we're going to go into even further items that we think could really benefit from you. And if you're finding a lot of this overwhelming, don't worry, you're not alone. I think even as we were putting this content together, we felt a little bit overwhelmed in doing this, right? And so while there isn't a one size all solution on how to win this tug of war between privacy and personalization, there are several best practices that you can apply. So let's go ahead and dial in a couple of the laws and understand a couple of the laws that would be valuable to have in your back pocket and really understand them, because some of these may not apply to the markets that you're engaging in. For example, if you're operating in the EU, if you're marketing to any European countries, then it's very likely you're going to be using GDPR. Just go ahead and use it. And GDPR tends to be one of the most strictest of all of them. So in some cases, applying GDPR to all of your marketing might be your safest bet. CCPA and CPRA are very common practices for individuals that are marketing within the US. And being that California is one of the most populated states, it is very likely that if you're marketing in the US, you're marketing to Californians. So applying these privacy laws and the details within them is also really important. There's also other areas that are very state specific, such as Colorado, Virginia, Utah. And then we get back to really some of the states and some of the very specific items around industry. And so for Canada, there are a number of different, regulations, such as Castle, which is the one that we tend to hear about a lot, and several others. Now, when it comes to very specific in compliancy and accessibility, things like ADA are really important. And I would say healthcare organizations, finance organizations, anyone who's marketing to certain demographics that are very consumer focused should really be mindful of ADA compliancy and how that is applied to their website, to their emails, to their e-learning, to several different tactics there. And then, of course, there's going to be things like HIPAA and how that might relate to areas such as healthcare and pharma. And so we'll go ahead and highlight some of these marketing tactics and some of the best ways to do that across various channels. And so kind of looking here, what we've actually done for you guys is a checklist of all of the different regulations on the left. And you'll see that many of these actually apply to some of the strictest laws. So right to access data, right to correct data, right to delete data, right to opting out of data. So that is the consumer's right or the customer's right to do several of those things. But not all marketers have these actually activated within their marketing automation systems or within their preference centers. And even things like security requirements and data minimization. Some of those items, again, are not at the hands of the consumer, but certainly at times not at the hands of the marketer because they might be behind gates. They might have a lot of governance and compliance issues internally to even get to some of that data. And Daniel, I don't know if there's any story you'd like to share on some of these items that the team or that the crew could kind of hear and learn a little bit about some of the challenges in applying some of these items.
Yeah, absolutely. It can get challenging, especially when you have, data stored in different siloed systems. That's where data fluidity becomes important, that the data can truly be managed in a fairly nimble way. We, have seen clients that, have gotten cease and desist letters when it appears to their consumers that they're not complying with either unsubscribes or some of these other rights. At least unsubscribes we've seen. And I think what you'll see in our recommendations is that, this list of check marks is pretty overwhelming, but the easiest way to manage it is to kind of build and plan to the highest level. So if you meet, generally GDPR is a pretty good standard. Stay on top of things by reviewing new things that come out. But if you meet GDPR requirements, you can generally meet most of the other ones. So you'll see that in the recommendations that we have in a few slides that we're saying, meet the most stringent requirements, and then you don't have to worry about the ones that are a little bit less.
Right. And like we said, there's several of these, but applying GDPR, especially the UK GDPR and even CCPA at times, those are the highest level. And at times that might be easier for a lot of the marketers to just go ahead and ensure that these items in this checklist are actually there. Now, let's talk at a high level about AI. There's so much happening at fast from an AI perspective. And slowly governments are catching up to this. They are a bit behind in terms of AI is already out there and in the world, but they don't necessarily have all of the laws baked in to best support, privacy applications there. And so, whether you're marketing to any one of these areas, whether it's, Canada, US, EU, and then really even further artificial intelligence challenges within a system perspective, ensure that you understand the rules and the regulations within your operations, but also ensure with your IT team what one of the AI platforms, which one of the generative AI platforms are actually compliant with what you're doing. For example, if you are a primarily using Google single sign-on throughout your organization and have Google Workspace, Gemini might be a great option for you, as opposed to using something like OpenAI that might not end up falling within your compliance standards. So talk to your IT team and also refer to AI regulations that are currently in development frequently, because they're changing quite rapidly.
I'll add one more thing here. There's one right that's on those checklists. It's the right to be exempt from fully automated decisions. So that's one place where AI, it's not just AI, it can be rules-based programming as well. But some of those regulations mean that you have to have some level of human decision-making for key decisions. So that's something to watch out for, where you can use, so the best way to do that is use AI to augment your decision-making process, where it involves, making a yes or no decision on someone's ability to access your product or qualify for your product, but don't use it to be the final say.
That's a great call out. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of devils in the details when it comes to data compliancy. So, I think that's a really great call out. Referring to that checklist and the details will help you in mitigating risk there. So, speaking of mitigating risk, we do have a bit of a path or a compass to help you navigate compliance. So, one of the things we believe really strongly in is embracing what we call a privacy by design in marketing. So this is not something novel to Shift. This is something that is common in the world. But there are some of the things that we've specifically applied to our own framework that we encourage all marketers to really invest in and stay focused on. So play it safe, in our opinion, and adopt some of the strictest regulations to your marketing if you're marketing within that specific region. So as Daniel and I have brought up several times, if you have even a small market within UK, we'd recommend that you gear towards the UK GDPR instance and you apply those standards to your marketing efforts. If you're marketing only to a very specific state or a very specific region, then you have a lot more flexibility there, and you can go ahead and really kind of be mindful of the standard stuff like can spam. If you're working in healthcare, of course, ADA, HIPAA compliancy, and be respectful with PHI and PII, of course. But all of this is to say, keep your customer at the heart of this. We're not just trying to put, journeys out and communications out just for the sake of them. We're trying to make experiences that are relevant to them, that surprise and delight them. And this allows you to make privacy a core value of the organization when you're keeping your customer at the heart of all of this. And to that end, start bringing in and making this almost a privacy first culture. So think through how privacy might be embedded more effectively across any one of your processes or any one of your technologies. So if you've got a checklist or if you've got a series of activities that you use to implement new technology, to audit existing technology and processes, make privacy part of that specific process, whether you're conceptualizing something, you're implementing something, or you're at the point of reporting something. So we've talked a bit about our compass framework a few times. We've dropped some subtle hints, but this is that framework right here. And we will go into details on each one of these, but this framework is essentially a step-by-step process that organizations should likely follow twice a year, depending on how much data is coming in and how much data is moving. It might make sense to do it once a month. It might make sense to do it once a year. It really depends on your organization. Some organizations we work with are in highly regulated states, highly regulated industries, so we would recommend it far more frequently. But starting at the top is, compliance audit and map, then how best to obtain consent, managing preferences. Then we have PET, performance enhanced technology. Think through ways to automate everything, streamlining the deletion process, and then set up and store a playbook or a series of recipes. And then again, rinse and repeat this, monitor these things at least twice a year. So easier to say once we actually get into the meat of all of this. So that first level right there is compliance orientated. data mapping and auditing. So we recommend doing a comprehensive data inventory at minimum, like I said, once or twice a year, understanding its sources, understanding its purpose. Flag any areas that may be considered out of compliance or out of regulatory need, and determine which areas that you are not compliant in today that you need to plan for tomorrow. Things like creating a data map, and then limiting any sort of, PII, for example. So Daniel, I don't know if you want to add anything to that one based
Yeah.
on your experience doing some of these items.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just add, by the way, if you have any questions, just feel free to click the Q&A button at the bottom and drop it in there, because we would love to handle any questions you have. Yeah, so I kind of picture this like follow the ball, just follow the data through the process. And you might be surprised how many different pieces of tech this touches. So from a tech layer, just examine your tech platforms. In general, rule of thumb is if you use more established, pieces of technology like Adobe or Salesforce or some of the bigger market players, they tend to have better security and adherence to good privacy standards. Some of the newer ones that may be cheaper for licensing, you may want to just double check their privacy, standards and what they're doing with the data, where it's being stored, to make sure that you're, in compliance with all the regulations that you're trying to follow. um, one of the things we don't think about is we all want to keep our data secure, but often internally is where the loosest security happens. So people's private data and PII, personally identifiable information, um, is important, and we want to respect what they've shared with us. And so internal sharing should be kept to a need to know basis. So this might look like auditing your users in Salesforce or in your marketing platform, and you don't need 15 admins in there. When somebody leaves your company, how quickly are they, decommissioned out of those different platforms? So some of those things can be fairly easy lifts to just set up a simple process to make sure that you're sharing data only with people that need it. And that, again, is respecting your customer and the data they've chosen to share with you. Over to you, Natasha, to walk us through consent.
Yeah. So at a high level, we've mentioned consent a few times, but really ensure that your privacy policies are outlining the right things from a data collection usage practices. In the past, I've worked with marketers who have worked with legal counsel and ensured that their policies, linked on their website, linked on their emails, linked in any relevant channels, are accurate and have version control in there, so that they reflect all of the various regulations that should be accounted for. So make sure that those privacy links are accurate, and then ensure that there's very user-friendly ways for individuals to opt in and opt out. And so a good example of this is even a pop-up, right? So if you are getting an email, if you're marketing and wanting to do an email subscriber program that ties to a newsletter that you've got, right then and there, you can ask for an email, but you can also ensure that you've got an explicit opt-in with the ability to click on that privacy link and any sort of terms as well, so that that user is explicitly consenting to actually engaging and getting that content that you're aiming to give them. So moving on from there, I'll pass the mic to Daniel to talk about preferences.
Yeah, absolutely. And to meet the most stringent requirements, so we mentioned a double opt-in earlier. That's where someone signs up via a form, or it's a checkbox on some other type of thing they're submitting, and then they get either a text or an email that then they have to click yes in, or reply yes to an SMS, and then that's the double opt-in, and then you have bulletproof consent from them, so that you're golden as far as sending them marketing messages until they remove that consent. Um, Consent management, it can get complex. It depends on how much you want to track like consent to specific newsletters through specific channels via, do they prefer SMS or email or in-app notifications or other things. So many marketing automation platforms have the ability to set up a preference center. So at a minimum, we recommend definitely taking advantage of that and setting that up. Um, Especially email providers are now getting more stringent about you must have, one-click unsubscribes in there. And typically in your marketing automation platform, that interacts with the preference center. Um, if you need to get more complex, there are more capabilities out there like consent management platforms, something like OneTrust that you can implement as your repository for all those consent. Salesforce has just come out with a consent data model you can use to build, nearly infinite permutations of consent that you can store and manage as well. That's especially good if you're using Marketing Cloud, but you can also access that data model through the Salesforce API. So it really depends on your use case, which one's the best one for you. But regardless, make it a good experience, as Natasha mentioned, for the customers. Moving on to privacy enhancing technologies, a lot of this is situational. I mentioned earlier, try to use trusted platforms that have been around for a while, not fly-by-night cloud companies where it's clear they're just starting up and they may not have all their privacy and encryption and everything buttoned up yet. If you need to, there are data anonymization things you can do, hashing or masking. I know, for example, Salesforce offers a product where you can hash or mask PII or health data automatically in the platform. So, only healthcare professionals see it, for example. But in general, you know, a lot of like the leading platforms already encrypt your data. So like if you're using AWS or Google Cloud for your data warehouse, they, at least Google Cloud, I know, encrypts your data at rest and in transit. So just be aware of what platforms you're using. And then as well as with healthcare data, especially, a lot of times there are platforms that are built to handle that. So we recommend using kind of those leading platforms in those areas because they will already build in those protections.
Yeah, and a few examples in both of these. So I think an organization we work with pretty regularly and have for years, Atlassian has done a great job in their, preference center management. If you know anything about Atlassian, they have, 10 SaaS products, lots of channels that are being leveraged, marketing, operational updates. But from a user's perspective, there is just one area that they need to go to opt in and out of various data and opt in and out of various communications. So just make it a lot easier for the users. It might mean that the marketers have to do some extra work at the back end, but you are going to run some risks if your marketing teams are not working together to bring that management of compliance together in one centralized experience. And to Daniel's point, working with some organizations who wanted to use chat bots, for example, for healthcare and pharma, you can't just use anything off the shelf. Don't go and buy Drift and Adobe chat if you're looking to use a chat bot for any sort of, actual data that's very private, very personal, such as healthcare records, such as pharmaceutical records. Use something that has the ability to securely intake data, such as Azure Health Bot, such as likely some custom solutions that are within the healthcare space. So just be mindful of that. There's a lot of really great technology, but not all technology is going to work for your industry and for your regulations. So moving on from there, let's talk a little bit about really kind of streamlining the deletion process. So Daniel, if you want to jump in on this one and some of the best practices there from a streamlining deletion.
Yeah, right to be forgotten is an important part of many of the regulations. And so you need to have a process in place working with your system admins to streamline these deletions. So it could just be a playbook that you have of, hey, go to these three places and click these three things, or it could be something more automated where, right to be forgotten request comes in and triggers deletions. Um, there's a balance because if they remain a customer, you have to maintain some level of data to operationally serve them. But at least the more personalized data, you do want to, delete and be able to show that you did that in a, robust way. You can even put these sorts of form requests into a self-service portal. There's a lot of, customer-facing technology you can use now to enable customers to self-manage those requests.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that, Natasha?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great call outs. And some of the, I would say, areas that we have found with this, not only is this valuable and it prioritizes customer engagement and prospect engagement over just large quantities of leads that are kind of barren and not really doing much to your marketing efforts anyways. It's a great way to potentially save some money too. And so if you have, for example, a database of 100,000 individuals, and you are not seeing engagement for more than 30,000 of them for the past 2 years, it's probably time to reconsider those leads even needing to be in the database. So it not only will be more secure and compliant and be more respectful of the leads that you have, it's also mutually beneficial to keep your database cleaner and likely save some more money. And finally, there's a lot of stuff that we just talked about, right? So the best ways to keep up with all of this is to ensure that all of these best practices are within what we like to call kind of a cookbook or recipe book that is accessible to your team, has all of the relevant rules and regulations, but more specifically, how it applies to the marketing efforts that you're doing every day. So, to kind of summarize, I would say this is one of the biggest takeaways of all of these. Prioritizing engagement over deletion is really important. And so, while it might be scary, I'm double clicking on this one a little bit. While it might be scary to delete leads that you've probably invested a lot of money and time in, it is likely going to be of value there. And it's more concerning to keep kind of dead data that's resulting in tech debt and data debt, and ultimately might be incompliant for you and not serving the business and marketing efforts too much. So let's go ahead and kind of start wrapping up this workshop or this webinar with some guiding principles to really delivering more customer-centric compliance. So I'll pass the mic over to Daniel to kind of talk through high-level takeaways of what we've discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with this first takeaway, we offer Tool Compass, but at an even higher level, it's make privacy part of your thinking around not your tech design, but and also your customer and prospect experience design. Um, I think, back in the day, companies used to try to, stockpile customer data, and that was seen as a big asset. I think now leading companies should see, instead of just hoarding data, they should see customer experience and customer trust as the assets. And so, hoarding data actually goes against those things. So, because the customers want to be, known that they want to know that their data is being used for the purpose that it was given and only for as long as it's needed.
Mhm.
So building that privacy in is important. Um, Again, treating customer experience as the true asset, sheds a different light on compliance and privacy. It's not just a burdensome thing that's imposed on us, but it is part of giving our customers and prospects great experiences, and it gives them more respect for our brand when they know we're not, misusing their data. Also, nobody likes to get sued. So it's a risk that I'm sure your legal teams and compliance teams worry about. And so the more that we reduce, the more that we proactively build privacy and compliance into our marketing design and experiences, the more we don't have to have as many follow-up meetings with legal and compliance and regulatory, and we can just focus on marketing and treating our customers right. Also, as Natasha mentioned, I mean, we've seen customers that might be paying up to 40% of their marketing database is unmarketable because they're not consented, and they're paying for that. A lot of marketing automation tools charge by database size. So you can keep your tech stack slim and within budget by deleting that data that's not being used or is out of date. And then lastly, you can improve your conversion rates and your impact by keeping only data that's needed and using the freshest data, the people who are actively engaged with your brand, not someone that you're trying to hit from 2 years ago. It gives you, again, more impactful marketing, and your team is putting their efforts into something that's driving more impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know we have thrown a lot at you, quite dense of content. So here's some great news for you. We are giving away a checklist that goes through all of the nitty-gritty of everything we talked about. You can share that with your team, and they will know step by step by step by step in their systems, in their processes, exactly when to implement and where to implement it. In addition, we can help, obviously, that's what we do a lot. So if you need some friends, we've got you. But we do recommend doing a data audit as a marketer and kind of spearheading that. We also recommend starting to build out your recipes for your playbook. And of course, like I said, we can be your co-pilot throughout this process. We can't reiterate enough that it's important to speak to your legal counsel. But what we thought we could do is, at minimum, since we said GDPR is one of the most, kind of strictest laws, and it's likely that you'll want to apply some of this. Here's just a sneak peek of some of those checklist items right here that you can work with your operations team and your marketing team to ensure that these are applied effectively. So now we've essentially reached the end of the content. And so we wanted to first kind of ask, and if you want to put anything in Q&A, let's kind of talk through this. Like, have any of you encountered any sort of legal challenges in the past? What have you learned from that? And even to that end, if you've experienced some of these challenges, what have you done to improve them? And how did that even work across multiple BUs? So we can look and see if anyone has any answers in the Q&A area. And then if you don't, that's okay. We can move on to the next questions. I don't think they got anything, Daniel. That's okay. Oh, we got a couple. Here we go. Let's go. I have an example from Christina. Okay, let's have you answer live. If you want to go ahead and share that.
Yeah, and another person says they go through ISO 27001 certification every year, and it's always eye-opening. So yeah, no kidding. That's
Yeah.
that's pretty strict. So we're also ISO 27001 certified, and yeah, we're very, very careful about how we handle data. It makes you think a lot more about it.
Absolutely. And I mean, even to that end, you might have strongly wanted a certain technology, the team is comfortable with it, or, it's kind of the best in the business, but it might not allow when you have to go through these certifications, you might not be able to use that type of technology. So there's some cultural kind of communications and navigations to do around ISO as well, as that is happening.
Christina, if you we don't have a way to unmute you, but if you want to type your example in the Q&A, you can.
Okay. You want to take this one, Daniel?
Sure. The Sunshine Act impacts pharmaceutical and med device companies, which complicates marketing ROI, especially with trade show and events. Tying educational events to revenue is not legal and a challenge with marketers. Yeah, that is challenging.
Yeah, this is a good example, Christina. Thank you for calling this out. And I also would say, like, to the point earlier of how every industry has its own very specific, acts, regulations, and items, you really have to lean into your specific industry. For those who are consultants or work in agencies, if you're working on accounts or organizations that you're marketing, you got to learn just as much as the marketers that are working there. So this is an excellent example of how easy it is to be incompliant when you just don't know. And that Sunshine Act really kind of covers so many organizations that likely are not applying it fully. So thank you so much, Christina, for sharing that example. And so we're just going to kind of wrap this up. Is there any other questions, from what we've talked about from the crowd here, that we can answer for you, either on this call or, after this call? And if you can't answer now or ask now, send us an email. We have our emails right here, natasha.ness, shiftparadigm.com, Daniel Mulvihill at shiftparadigm.com. So if you didn't get a chance to ask us questions, don't worry, we're just a send away to help you out. And we will be sending several goodies as a follow-up to this session.
Yeah, including we'll make this recording available. So if you want to capture something off one of the slides that we said, just run through the recording. Thanks, everyone. We're at time. Appreciate your time. And like Natasha said, reach out to us with any questions.
Thanks all. Have a wonderful day. Bye.